Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. I am going to be using this microphone because there is a video happening. So ordinarily, I would not be using the microphone. So I hope you can hear me well. I'm very, very excited to be here today. That's the first thing I want to say to you. And I know there is a cross-section probably of people here with various startups, right? Yes. And you've been doing many, many things in your fields, making your ideas happen. And one of the things I want to begin with is this. Lee mentioned, I think, in his introduction that one of my specialties is something called improvisational leadership. And this is something that I created. Over the years, I've always had a dual career where I have blended my work as a consultant in organizations, helping organizations and leaders with executive coaching as well, grow their ideas through their leadership effectively. And leadership is something that I am very passionate about. Early in my career, I realized that the very same skills that actors use and musicians use. Are there any people here who play music in any way, who are musicians? Yes? You know musicians improvise, right? Actors improvise. And the skills that allow you to do that well and to be very, very skilled at that are the same exact tools that are needed for leaders in order to be effective as influencers. Because basically, when it comes down to making a pitch, what you're doing is in that moment, you are the leader of the idea that you're putting forth, and you are trying to influence whoever is listening to you to buy into that idea, right? So it's a job that really requires a lot of skill. And I mentioned the improvisational leadership piece because actually the very first dimension of improvisational leadership has to do with having a strong understanding that really all that exists in any given interaction is you, the other person or people, and the moment that you share together. The moment. Right now, we're in a moment. Yes? You came from something a moment ago. So did I. We rushed over here after talking to the folks from that video challenge competition. And now we're here. And everyone in this room has another moment to get to after this. For this brief time, our time together needs to be focused on making this moment rich for each of us, a collaboration. When you're making a business pitch, one of the essential aspects of the business pitch and presentation is that we have a healthy respect for the moment that we're sharing with that person. What does that mean? It means that we remove as many distractions as possible. So if you're making a video pitch, what we see graphically that's in the presentation, especially at the very beginning, has to be in concert, in harmony with what you're saying. The person who is there on camera has to be communicating something that connects to the audience and builds a relationship. And if you're in person, the very same thing has to happen. The job of the presenter is to make a connection, to make a relationship to the people who are there. Now, in any business pitch or presentation, the first important reality, speaking of the moment, is this. It's the hook. It's that which will draw in the audience. And I'm sure you all know this. How many people have heard about the hook before? Of course. To hook somebody in means, it's a simple word that basically means this. I care enough about you, and I have respect for you in terms of your time and all that you have going on, that I will make sure that I get right to the heart of what I want you to know about what I think might help you. And hooking somebody in means getting their attention. It means snapping them into awareness. We need the hook now more than we needed it even 30 years ago. Even in advertising 50 years ago, Mad Men period. Anybody know about this Mad Men TV show that's in the United States? It'll definitely, I'm sure, reach here at some point. It's all about advertising in the 1960s. And the hook was important then too. The difference now is that our attention span today, in 2015, is different, literally. The neurotransmitters of the brain, the synapses, our brains have changed. The connection between our brains, the visual abilities, and our ability to process data has changed. We have a faster ability to synthesize imagery because in video and film, edits and frames have changed. Have you watched a movie made in the 1940s, for example? And you notice that sometimes it'll stay on the same scene for quite a while, and then it might change to something else. Later in the 1980s and certainly the 70s, there was experimentation with the use of video. Suddenly we have this very fast-paced editing that happens, which means that people become accustomed to quick cuts. You know what I mean, right? So we have a very, very fast ability to go from one thought to another that almost replicates what goes on in the brain. So if you don't hook somebody in right at the beginning, your movie, if you're presenting a movie, or your visual presence, because right now I'm like the movie you're watching, will become second to the movie going on inside of the mind of the audience. Because you didn't hook them in, so now they get hooked in by their thoughts, by who they have to call, by the fight they had with their girlfriend before they left for work, by the fact that, oh my God, it's my husband's birthday today, I have to go buy something, and all of a sudden I'm not listening to what the presenter is saying. So number one is grab the attention of the listener. How do we do that? Before we even begin, there's something we bring on stage to help us deal with the noise, right? The noise. There's always noise. There's always somebody doing something that could be a distraction. Right now it's a hammer. You can hear a hammer. The other day, yesterday when I was teaching at AmCham, in the middle of the workshop, somebody decided to wash the windows. And I mean, really, in a very devoted and passionate way, he was washing the windows. The windows were shaking and we could feel the earth moving. At first I thought, it's not an earthquake, is it? And then I realized, no, there's a guy washing the windows. So there's always something that we have to be, in a way, dealing with. What we bring on stage to hook people before we open our mouth and say anything is our body and our mind and our intention. One of the first things I want to convey to you before I talk about the presence, which is the other word that I would use, the presence that we have that has to find a way to connect with the audience, is this. Words are important. What's more important than the words, because people don't really hear the words as much as they hear the intention behind the words. If you can go home with that idea, it would be may be the key to something very powerful in making your pitches. It's the intention behind the word that is conveyed that matters. It's not all the data and you telling me how great the data is that really matters. It's your intention. It's the emotion. It's what I feel about the idea. It's what I feel about you and why I think my idea might help you and what my intention is, which is hopefully to help you, to motivate you, to influence you, to see that maybe your life might need this improvement that I might be talking about. While I'm talking to you right now, there's an intention that I feel as I'm speaking to you. I'm saying words, and maybe you're picking up my intention. What intention are you picking up as I speak to you right now about this subject so far? Quick, just somebody call it out or raise a hand. Yes. I want to help. This is true. This is what I feel. So you're matching something that I feel. That I've been a little successful, that maybe you're feeling that. Any other intention that you're feeling from me right now about what I feel about this topic? I want to hook you in too. Yes, I'm talking about hooking, and I'm doing that while I'm talking. Yes, exactly. What else? What emotion do you feel I'm conveying right now? To be a model. Yes, thank you. Someone else?
You like the topic?
I love the topic. Yes. And in fact, can you feel that I love this topic? Because I care about the stories that get conveyed about business. I teach at MIT Sloan. I am around many people at MIT who have brilliant ideas. I'm in the business school, so of course there are many people doing startups, and the story of these startups is very important to me. Because of my background also in theater, there's another reason I care about story, because story is the stuff that makes the human being, the human community, move forward and learn about itself. It brings comfort. Religion is a story. It's the story that comforts people. Science has a story. It's a story that makes us understand the universe. So when I say to you that the intention is important, I cannot say that strongly enough. Because the words are great, it's nice to have the data, it's important, it's essential. We need to have a concrete, very, very specific technical backup to whatever we say. I don't in any way contradict that. And all of the technical knowledge will be lost if the intention behind the words is not human and making relationship. And it has to dare to look into the eyes of the person you're talking to, even if you're on a video. You have to look right through the camera into the person who you visualize you're talking to and speak to the heart of that person, as if you imagine that that person is your friend, a trusted friend, someone you're not threatened by. So there's the first issue. Most people, when they create a business pitch, the first instinct for a beginner, and it's very natural, there's no fault to this, there's no judgment about this. Most of us will think, I really need to convince the person, right? Have you felt that? I need to tell you why my idea is good. I need to really I have to prove it to you. I have to prove to you that my idea is good. What that does, if you consider it, and by the way, it's understandable that you'd want to do that because you want to get the money, you want the venture capitalists, you want the investors, you want to get people on board. Of course, right? The problem that sets up, strictly from the point of view of telling the story and having what I said is that moment of relationship with your audience, is this. If I am trying to prove to you and convince you of my idea, I am setting up a conflict before I even open up my mouth. Because the conflict becomes, I'm assuming that you don't like my idea, or that maybe my idea isn't good enough until I have to prove it. So now I've already put myself in a lower position, and it makes me appear less confident if my intention is to convince. Because do we try to convince people who already want to listen to us? No. Do you like to listen to somebody who is standing there trying to tell you why you should really want to listen to them? How do you feel when somebody does that? You tell me. When somebody is strongly convincing you and trying to tell you why you should listen to what they're saying, how do you feel? You tell me. Attacked. That's a strong word, and that's exactly, I think, and that's why we call it, by the way, hard sell, because hard sell is hard, and it can feel like an attack. What else do you feel when somebody is telling you what they want you to think? Pressure. Exactly. Now you're creating the conflict of pressure. So the challenge and the art, and why we're all standing here and sitting here today, is this. The very natural instinct that we would all have, which is normal, which is to say, I want to make a business pitch, so I want to convince you, is the very thing that can most work against the business pitch. It can most work against it. So, wow, what do we do about that? That's our natural instinct. We have to find a way to transform this desire of convincing into an act of dialogue. Because when I'm in a dialogue with you, and when I'm in a conversation, I'm not thinking about convincing. If you're my friend, if you're somebody who I believe is interested, I'm more interested now in things like listening to you, sharing something with you, offering something, which, by the way, in improvisational leadership, if you took one of those seminars, you'd hear me say that at the heart of the improvisation and improvisational leadership skill base is something called making an offer, where you're actually having what we call a yes and mentality, where you make an idea offering, and whatever the audience says back to you, you build on it, and that's collaboration. These are the things that start to happen when we shift from convincing to dialogue. Can you follow that? And does that connect? Does that make a connection for you? Yes? So I mentioned that when we come up on stage, we have something already with us that we carry with us every day, which is our physical presence. And I want to take that last word, presence, because it's so important. There are 5 dimensions of presence that we need in a presentation or a pitch. Basically, a pitch is a presentation of an idea, right? It's trying to hook someone in. One is that you, if you're making this presentation, have to be accessible. Can somebody translate accessible for me in Spanish? Meaning, you're somebody that somebody can approach. Yes, you're somebody like I can walk toward you and I feel like you're accessible. You're somebody I can go toward and there's not a wall or a door, or I don't have to call 4 people in order to get connected to you, right? So accessibility is very important. Number 2 is engagement. To have presence, the audience needs to feel they can engage with you and also that you are engaging with them and not talking to yourself or talking to the ideas. What often happens is that people become so consumed in the idea, and believe me, I've been there, where you're thinking of a new model, you're thinking of a new project, your startup idea, you've been working on it all hours of the night, your family never sees you, right? You're so working, so much involved, and suddenly it's almost as if we forget how to talk to people. We're only talking to the project. We're talking to the ideas. We're talking in such a very technical way that we're not anymore with the people. We need to engage the human being that's in the moment, right in front of us. The third dimension, after accessibility and engagement, is making sure that we have what is perhaps the most essential attribute or quality that is needed now in business. And I'm hearing this in business schools everywhere. Empathy. Empathy. You might think, wow, business, empathy, huh? What, business, empathy? Yeah. The world has changed. The world is changing. The hierarchical, top-down, the boss says, hey, this is the plan, now go do it, and everybody goes and runs and does it. This hierarchy, we still see these hierarchies in our companies. I know they're still here, they're in the States. That hierarchy is changing. Sometimes it's closed, sometimes it's open, it's flat, and sometimes you're wondering, where is the boss? Either way, what is needed is empathy, because when you have greater accessibility to the people, and you're having less of this hierarchical ordering, there's a need for more empathy. So when you're making your pitch, you have to find a way to talk to the human heart of the person who you are trying to influence. It's not enough to talk to their mind. It's not enough to talk to their knowledge. It's very important to let your knowledge go through your heart and speak to their heart. Don't leave the knowledge behind. Make sure we include the heart when we're speaking and the empathy. And make sure you imagine how that person might be feeling and what it would be like to feel from that person's perspective about your idea. That's incredibly important. One of the techniques I coach for people to do when you're getting ready to do the pitch, the presentation, whether it's live or not, is get a friend to play the person that you're pitching to and let them ask questions. Don't have them play a skeptical person. Let them play themselves and what they would want to ask you, what they care about. And you have to then dialogue with them and use some of what you say in that little role play in your pitch. The other very, very important essence of presence has to do with being able to be expressive. And when I say expressive, I don't mean you have to perform or you have to put on a show. When I say expressiveness, what do you think of? What do you think I mean by expressiveness?
Body talk.
Say it again?
Body talk. Body talk.
Body talk?
Body talk.
Body talk. Body language. Expressive, exactly. Allowing your body to be what we say in harmony with your words, so that's part of one's expressiveness, so that I'm not standing here like now, talking to you like this, right? My body is not right now, we say congruent. I just learned that there's a similar word in Spanish, congruent. My body isn't, I really care about this subject, right? But I don't look right. My body is completely contradicting. So to really let yourself get engaged with what you're saying. What's another association you have to expressiveness? What does it mean to be expressive? It means, yes, go. Yes. Yes, which that emphasis, he said the way you emphasize words, you don't emphasize the words because you're thinking I should emphasize. Usually we emphasize words for the same reason in music, when the dynamics change and it gets louder or softer, or there's an emphasis that happens because of the way the notes are arranged. It's because the composer felt something and wanted to convey that feeling, and wants that feeling to come through the particular tempo and rhythm and choice of notes. And that is the expressiveness. Expressiveness means emotion, the emotion that's being conveyed, and that something from the inside is being delivered to the outside, expressed, instead of being internalized. Finally, what we need is a vision. And of course, you with your startups, you have that vision, you have the story, you have the idea. Sometimes I'm giving presentation coaching and people don't even know the vision yet of what they want to be talking about. Give me an example, please, of some of the startup projects and ideas that you're working on, please, so I know who's in the room. I'd love to hear. Just call it out. Just give me your hand and then tell me some of the ideas and projects you're working on. A few people? Anybody have one you want to offer? Yes?
Okay, my startup is about delivering groceries in 2 hours.
Delivering groceries in 2 hours. Fantastic. Something else? And it doesn't have to be that your idea is already fully formed. It can be, this is still in an idea stage. Somebody else? Yes?
A free prosthetic device to help people who have amputations to have an easier rehabilitation process.
A prosthetic device that can help people who've had amputations do...
The rehabilitation process?
The rehabilitation process. That is so important. We're dealing with that a lot now in the States with many, many soldiers who've come back. This is very important. It's a big deal. It's a very big thing. And I come from Boston, where we had the marathon bombing, and we have many, many people who lost arms and legs, and some people who lost both legs. So this is a huge topic. I connect with that very much. So when we have these ideas that we have to put forth, obviously, this already tells a story. The delivering of grocery within 2 hours, groceries. We need that, right? We don't have time. This is not just a nice idea. This could be essential for somebody's quality of life and what kind of family environment they can live in. So there's a story behind that idea. It's practical. It also speaks to a human need. Right? So that's the kind of story you want to bring forth, that the rehabilitation process, or what happens when the person is looking to have their grocery delivered, is something that will affect their personal story, and ultimately their happiness, and their well-being, and their enjoyment of life. Because ultimately, all of this stuff we're doing in business is to make life a little easier. Let's face it. It's not easy to live on planet Earth sometimes, right? It's a little bit challenging. So in order to make life a little easier and to deal with the conflicts of life, business creates solutions when it's inspired through the innovations that are represented by the minds of the people sitting in this room. Now, there is something else I want to mention about a business pitches and presentations, and it's this. It's very important to be able to know how to read the moment and read the room, which means sensing your audience, sensing what they are thinking, sensing what they're feeling, what they might wish that you would be talking about, what their thoughts and reactions are, being able to read somebody's body language, or even if there's a tension in the room or there's a calmness in the room, the presenter needs to be able to sense that. And if you're making a video presentation and your pitch is in a film and voiceover format, we have to be sensing, even in that format, read the audience. Who are these people and what might they be interested in? That's part of it, obviously. How many of you here have made a business pitch already? I'd just like to see a show of hands. You've already created a business pitch. How many of you have ever given a presentation on a particular idea or subject or topic that you care about? Terrific. How many of you are here for a different reason? You haven't done either of those two things. Anybody? And what's the reason that you're here? Learning. Fantastic. Number one thing about any activity, don't forget the learning and don't forget the fun. right? We have to make sure business can be very serious stuff. There's also an element of fun that has to be conveyed in the presentation, and I mean that in all seriousness. If we're not having fun with these pitches and with these ideas, then there's something missing, and it won't be conveyed. Connecting with your audience is incredibly important. And let me fill this idea out a little bit. When I speak to you, if I'm not making a connection and I'm not engaging your story, then my story will be lost, what I'm trying to say. Because people want to feel validated for what they already feel. And they want to feel engaged. So it's very, very, very important that we engage people's stories and that we use story, that we tell a story through our presentation so that when the listener is interacting with it, they feel like they've been brought into a story that we have invited them into. And the story is part of what the hook is about, right? The ability to tell the story and make people feel like they're part of the story instead of making them feel like they're targets. Targets, where we see them as having something we want and I want to get something from you. That's not telling a story. You have money, I need your money, so let me tell you what I need from you and give it to me. No. It's a story. There has to be a collaboration. I know a lot of people, men and women, who their passion in life, quite frankly, is to give money to promising ideas. They've succeeded in their businesses, in their industries, and now what they want to do is help grow other ideas. And when I talk to them, these are people who have accomplished something already. They are very confident in what their abilities are, and sometimes they feel like there was something more they needed to do with their life. There might be a passion they had that they didn't fulfill. There might be that they were very interested in, let's say, I don't know, sports, but they went off into a business direction. So then somebody comes to them with an idea, a startup, that has to do with something about measuring the heartbeat when somebody is working out, or being able to be aware of all of your medical data when you're working out, or something else about sports, a sneaker design, sports shoe design that really helps give ultimate performance. When I talk to my colleagues and friends who are investors and who look to help people and contribute, they tell me that what they're looking for most when somebody gives a presentation is they're looking to see something in that person that reminds them of the passion they had when they first started their idea. So they go back into their own story. They want to feel like they can help somebody else grow an idea the way they did. And they want to feel like they could become an important partner in that person's life. So the story is incredibly important. I had one friend say to me, I heard a presentation and he just gave me like an avalanche. How do you say avalanche in Spanish? Like when the mountain, avalanche. Okay, there you go. Good. An avalanche of data and statistics and bottom line. And he said, look, I'm a money person, so of course I want to know all of that. He said, but I didn't need 70% of the presentation to be pouring that on my head. I walked away and I didn't even know who these people are, why they care, what makes them get up in the morning and go do this. How has this impacted their family? Where did they get the idea in the first place, right? Somebody in the challenge we were just doing now said, I got this idea because a family member I had his car stolen. And it made me think of this technology that would be a locking system in the car. Well, right away, that's a personal offer that says, hey, something intimate happened to me, and I want to help people who have that experience. So finding a way to hook people in through the story is very, very important. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes is also very important. And remembering that if you're giving a presentation that is in the moment, and your audience isn't saying very much to you, what is a very natural tendency is to begin to imagine, I should say, that you know what they're thinking. Have you ever had that happen where you're standing in front of people and they're not saying something back, and so then you start to make up a story about what you think they're thinking? Anybody have that happen? Yes? And have you ever made up a story that sounds something like, Oh, they might be bored. This isn't connecting. Anybody have that thought? Oh, wow, I'm really, right now, what I'm saying, this really isn't going well. They really think this is no good. That is what we call the inner story. Remember that everybody has an inner story and an outer story. And the inner story is made up of our thoughts, feelings, and ideas, some of which are coming from raw, primitive emotion. And what we call it in acting is the inner critic. Does anyone here know what the inner critic is? Do you hear that expression before? You're saying yes? How do you define the inner critic? I know you know what it is.
Yeah, it's the way that the presenter
Yes.
feels in that moment. I mean, for example, if I'm delivering something out and I try and I start thinking, I'm not doing good. Oh, my hands. Look at my hands. Oh, the way how I'm standing up. So
In one sentence.
in one sentence. I'm going to say it in Spanish, okay? Yeah. Es autocrítica, o sea, cuando uno está enfrente a la audiencia y te empiezas a cuestionar todo lo que tú haces. If someone could help me to translate that in English, that would be good. For you.
See? Translate a quick, that sentence, yes?
So it's the autocritic inside if you start to question everything that you do.
Yes. And the inner critic even goes a step beyond that. It's that self-questioning, self-doubting. And you know it's the inner critic when it starts to tell you you're no good. You're making a mess of things. It's terrible what you said. People don't like you. How dare you get up there? You don't know what you're doing. You shouldn't really be doing this because you don't really have any skill at this. They think you're a fool. You look stupid. You look stupid. You look too fat. You look too thin. You look too smart. You don't look smart enough. It's all those toxic messages that go in the brain and that sit there and activate us. Some of us have an inner critic that shows up before, others during, others after a big event. Why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because if we don't have a strong relationship to knowing how to manage our inner critic, that internal story is going to bleed into the outer story that we're trying to say. The inner critic will say, don't say anything, so we'll be quiet. Or it'll make us second guess every word we say, and then we will be very kind of awkward in our speech because we're hearing something say, yeah, that word, no, not that word, yep, not that word. Can you imagine? By the time you go to speak, it's, right? Why is this essential? You tell me, why is it essential? Why am I coming here to say to you, in order to create a vibrant, influential, persuasive business pitch and presentation, we need to be able to manage our inner critic. Why am I saying that? Make the connection. You tell me. Why is this important? Yes. Yes, I think you were going to say something? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, what do you think is important about that?
We could express better our idea.
Exactly. See, I love that you just went right to the heart, because it's very practical. If we're not paying attention to the inner critic, who are we paying attention to? The audience. If I'm all caught up in worrying about how do I look, how do I sound, did I sound smart, do I sound like I have enough intelligence, do they like me? Do they like me? Do they like me? Which is maybe on a baby level, what's underneath everything the inner critic is saying. Do they like me? And what's my reputation going to be when I finish? Are they going to think I'm okay? If I'm not worried about that, I have the time and the space and the energy to care about you, to care about the audience, to care about the person I'm making the pitch to. So this is incredibly important. I work with people who are in industries, I work with CEOs, I work with people who are in the performing arts. I've worked with actors who work on Broadway and who tell me, you know what, I'm an actor, I have training, and the hardest thing for me to do is to stand spontaneously and talk, let's say, to the press, or when I'm being interviewed about something spontaneously, somebody sees me on the street and it's a spontaneous grab, we call it. It's a grab conversation where somebody, oh, now I have to talk about something. And these are people that are trained to be on stage. So can you imagine the people who aren't trained to be on stage? And it is all the same. It's kind of, there's a democracy, there's an egalitarian quality to this. It doesn't matter one's status, one's wealth, it doesn't matter family background, cultural background, where you were born in the world, how much money you have, and how much fame, or whether you work as a janitor. Everybody deals with those inner critic self-doubts. The smart leaders are leaders who understand two things. And you're a leader when you're making a presentation. Number one, in order to be effective, I need to know myself. I need to know when my inner critic shows up. Maybe it shows up before, during, or after the event, and I need to find a way to do either self-coaching or get coaching to help me with that. Because if it shows up before, I'm not going to deliver my message clearly. It's going to stop me from what I want to say. If it happens during, I'm going to come across as less confident. Less confident. If it happens after, I won't be able to enjoy my success, which is what happens very often. Some of you are smiling. Exactly, you know what I mean. The second thing the leader understands is that it's not enough to just know oneself. We have to understand the other person too, because they may be having the same thing happen, and that's how we build strong teams. By the way, this isn't a team conversation. That's not what this presentation is about today. I will just say to you, how many people here work in teams? All right. It's a collaborative world now, right? It's a collaborative world now, baby. There's no more just the individual, right? We need to be able to interface with people that are around the world, people that are in different areas, and it's all about the team. If I really want to have a very collaborative team, I need to be able to anticipate what are the inner critics even of my other teammates, and how can I help them feel more confident and grow them. And back to the presentation and pitch piece. Remember that we can plan, we can have a specific agenda, and we can have everything laid out, even in the video or the PowerPoint or the live presentation. We need to learn how to prepare for the unexpected, to be ready for the unexpected, to be ready for the fact that this PowerPoint slides don't work because somehow the cable is frayed at the end. It's broken. Can't use the PowerPoint. What do you do now? This happened to somebody I know recently who was giving a talk in a company I was at. He said, I froze. His hands got very wet. His mouth was dry. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, you know your material, right? He said, I know. I lost every thought in my mind. So we have to almost go into the moment expecting that we don't have everything we think we'll need, and always have a backup plan, always have a plan B and a plan C in case plan B doesn't work. We need to know our ideas well enough so that you could pitch your idea alone with one other person with only a candle for your light in the middle of a desert where there's no food and no water. Right? Though you can't depend on anything, and it's just you and that human being. And of course I'm saying that with humor, and I also mean it seriously. So have a backup plan. Feel comfortable enough that you don't have to rely on the technology that you're going to be utilizing. Now, as far as the video presentations, I want to make some points about that. Everything is created in video and in the audio applications that are utilized, like voiceover and certainly any music. Nowadays, at a very high level, okay, what we're watching online has become increasingly sophisticated. If we look at what was put on the internet, or on the web, we used to call it, right, in 1998 or 1999 or 2000, it would have very different quality visually than what we see today, right? Things have really changed. So that means that we all have to up our game in terms of the visual material that we put out online, because there's a lot of competition and competing imagery for us to look at. So in terms of video, a couple of things are very important that I want to mention. Make sure you don't spread your budget dollars too thin to try to do too many fancy things in video, and then therefore sacrifice the basic quality of the video as well as its accessibility to the user. Make sure it's downloadable effectively across platforms. Make sure that it is clear in varying kinds of devices, mobile devices. You know about the transition that's happening now in terms of websites and Google and Android phones, and phones have to now be, the websites have to be designed so that they are applicable to phones. This is a big deal. People are using these devices to view most of the data that's coming in. This is number one. It's very important. So rather than spending your dollars on something else, that has to be essential. Secondly, the visual imagery. In Hollywood, there's somebody called the cinematographer and the designer. There's a designer who looks at everything visual that comes across that screen. Now, when we're working in startups and we have low budgets, we can't afford to go buy some designer who might have a higher salary than my entire project, right? What we can do, however, is think smart. We can find people we know who have a visual sense to help us, especially if we tend to be engineers. How many engineers are in the room? Hello. I love working with engineers. Obviously, I spend a lot of time at MIT, so I love working with engineers. And many of you have a very strong design sense. Who here is in the design aspect? Who does design, working in various graphic formats? Anybody here work in software and implementing code? Anybody working code? So I'm mentioning all these different skill bases because I know that some of us have more or less strength in terms of seeing the visual design. Seeing the visual design is not unlike being able to feel the relationship with the person, because design is sending, like you said, body talk or body language. Design and visual images are sending a signal to the people in the audience. So if you're trying to tell something very important, but behind you have an image that makes people laugh, then you're going to be having a cacophony, an argument between what you're saying and the visual behind you. So find people who can help you work with that visual. Keep it simple, keep it clear, and in connection to what I said about the hook in the beginning, with your words and what you say, your hook has to be simple, clear, get to the point, and as Lee said at the very beginning, make sure you get to the hook right away. Don't spend your first time, your first precious moments leading up to a big introduction. Remember this: people form an impression of you, your pitch, and your idea within the first 5 to 10 seconds. 10 seconds, I already have an impression of you. Sometimes 1 second. There is actually a video application that is online that helps people look at our internal biases against certain races. I actually did it. It's a very powerful thing. I don't remember the name of it right now, but if you want it, email me and I'll get it. And what it shows is very fast images, and you have to immediately click something according to your response to what you see. And it helps you understand if you have any internalized biases or biases against people who are from African American descent, in the case of what I was looking at, or people from other cultures. And this is happening very, very, very fast. So we form an impression, and our internal judgment is affected and activated often within a second, because this thing I was looking at in this application was less than a second. Very fast. So when you're giving your pitch, make sure you don't waste those opening moments and give people time to let their mind wander or make an impression about you and put you in a box. That has nothing to do with who you are, but rather that box might be a reflection of the fact that you were a little nervous about starting and you didn't want to seem rude. Come right out there with the hook. Now I want to just pause before I go on and say this. Sometimes mistakes happen where people think I mean you have to be out there and in their face and really selling it from the beginning and hooking, because you know you hear the word hook and you think of fishing, right? And you want to throw the hook out and grab the fish. No, it's not aggressive. A hook is something soft that happens in a very human way that makes a person stop and pay attention. I say soft because what I mean is if it comes too sharp, the hook, it can actually push the person back. So you want to make that hook something that feels like an invitation, that makes the person want to say, oh yeah, I'd like to dialogue with you about that. As I said a moment ago, the word dialogue, right? And getting back to the video and the production values, which is really what I'm talking about now. We have to make sure we're looking at the production values of whatever we're creating in these business pitch pieces that we have. Because production values are crucial, and I mean, you know, the quality of the sound, the quality of the visual, and the quality of also the actors. Remember this. Have any of you used voiceover? An audio where somebody is speaking in your pitches? Raise your hand if you have. Yes? Remember this. The voiceover is essential. Voiceover is an art. It is an art form that requires training. It is an acting. Actually, what we call it now is voice artists or voice actors. I do voiceover, where my voice is used in narrations for museums. You know, I might go and work at a financial institution, and I am speaking the words of the product that they are trying to promote, or it could be anywhere. It could be television, commercial. And people who are trained in this art will tell you two things. The first part of it is this. In voiceover, you never try to sound like you're an authority. You try to speak to the human being that's in front of you, everything I just said. And the second thing is, voiceover is not something that you can learn in a day or an hour. And sometimes, the person who has the idea for the project and the person who has the startup baby that you've been holding in your belly, you know, being pregnant with for all these years, and now you're giving birth, even though you love the project, you may not be the best person to do the voiceover, because you may not have that training. So this is called knowing how to grow a team to give the opportunity for somebody else to complete you as a leader. At Sloan, there is a professor called Deborah Ancona who talks about the notion of the incomplete leader. And the incomplete leader says, I know that I don't have all the tools and skills, I don't have every single quality perfectly developed, and so what I do know I have to do is find people who can help to complete what is missing. So find people who can be very effective in helping you to deliver the product in the best possible quality.